As it's Mozart's birthday, yes, he'd be 263 years old now, I think. So, but first, as it's his birthday today, January 27th. Talking of classical music, this is thought to be the world's first ever performance conducted using a new type of baton, which has the potential to change the lives of visually impaired musicians. Many blind musicians perform as soloists, but they're excluded generally from orchestras because they can't see the conductor. But this baton might be the solution. Vahakn Matossian and his father made instruments for disabled musicians, and they're the brains behind the Haptic Baton. And Kevin Satizabal is a pianist based in Northampton and has been involved in testing the baton. Well, Vahakn explained, first of all, how it works.
It's a great question. The baton registers the hand movement of the conductor, so it sort of listens out for the angle of the hand and the sort of violence or the softness that the hand might move of the conductor. And it converts this movement information into something that can be sort of felt by the players. So it converts it into sort of vibration. And so it beams this information wirelessly to each player, and each player wears a band either on their ankle or on their legs or on their wrists. It's sort of up to them where they wear these bands. And there's a sort of 3D high-definition vibration that the player feels, really in sympathy with the hand of the conductor.
But the conductor is still standing up in front of the orchestra, waving the baton, is he?
That's right. It's a totally classical sort of conductor situation where they're in charge, they've got the score, they're standing up in front of the whole orchestra, however big it may be, and any player who's wearing the band, whether they're visually impaired or not, if they feel they want to wear this, and it's more commonly right now for the visually impaired musicians, they're feeling what the conductor's doing, and the conductor also wears one, so she or he will wear them on their ankles, let's say, and so they can feel what sort of information they're imparting to the players.
And I don't know much about classical music and the role of the conductor. Kevin Satizabal, isn't it the case that, a conductor rehearses with an orchestra, so they know more or less what the conductor wants from them, and then the live performance is just a way of, I suppose, conducting, pushing it along, if you like. Why do they need something that vibrates, whether they're visually impaired or not?
Well, basically because the conductor is human, and I think however much you rehearse, the interpretation might sometimes change in the performance. Maybe, the conductor might play a little bit slowly if the acoustic is a little bit different of the whole, because it might be fuller or it might be more empty. So all these kind of things change slightly. And at the moment, as a blind musician, it's very difficult to follow what a conductor is doing. You have to only do that by listening. But what these bands enabled me to do was to come in precisely when the conductor wanted me to come in, and that was very powerful.
And you've tested it out. Just talk us through how it felt, how different it is for you.
So for me, it was really liberating. I particularly found it helpful in faster pieces because the beat was very definite. So at the beginning of one of the pieces, a few of us had to come in exactly when the conductor wanted, and he was able to give us a couple of strong beats which gave the tempo, and then we were able to come in. Usually, if I was doing that by sound, I would have to rely on someone breathing in or give me some sort of verbal cue. But in an orchestral situation, when you're very far back from a conductor, that would be very difficult. So to actually be able to sit with sighted musicians and blind musicians and be able to feel this beat, I felt really confident and was able to focus more on my music making.
And Vahakn, was it straightforward to develop this technology?
In some ways, it was relatively straightforward. And the most straightforward thing was just to keep the visually impaired musicians on hand at all times as much as possible, really develop it with them. That's the sort of the key to the success, is to involve the people who are going to be the users, who are going to be the experts in this thing eventually, to involve them from the start. So the decisions, I'd say, as a designer following the design process, they're relatively obvious, but just how to make it small, how to make it fit, and how to make it sort of suit everyone, that's the tricky part. And really, Grace, my co-developer and programmer, Charles Matthews, is an absolute genius. Him and his really inspired use of mathematics within the coding, I'm sure he'd say it wasn't that easy. But that's really the process, the design process. You ask the right questions and you involve the right people from the start, and you should come up to a good answer.
What were the kind of tips, if you like, or suggestions that visually impaired musicians suggested to you in developing this? What were the kind of things that they wanted?
Our earlier prototypes were a bit slow. We knew they were slow. They had a delay in the timing, and we knew that wasn't going to be possible in the main thing. And that's something they picked up on immediately, was it had to be, right on the money in terms of speed. In terms of in a way there's no they. We had sort of 7 different players in the performance, and we had maybe 5 different players during the development, and everyone has subtly different opinions. And quite often it was about the comfort of the thing they're going to wear. It's quite an intimate thing we've designed. It's, touching the skin. It's close to you as your underwear is, almost, in terms of touching the skin. And it, lives and breathes with you. This thing moves and sort of pushes you around in terms of feeling. So really these subtle things were quite important to take into account from every player who gave us their opinions.
Kevin, was this going to enable you to do that you couldn't do before?
Well, hopefully it will enable me to play with big ensembles. I've played, the only time I've managed to play with an orchestra before was as a soloist, and that was different because the conductor followed me. But I hope that it would open the door for me and for other visually impaired musicians to just be able to play with orchestras and to be able to really understand the interpretation of the conductor. So definitely this technology has a lot of potential.
It's a game changer, is it?
I should hope so, definitely.
And do you think conductors will be happy to wear their end of the technology, the wristband, I think, or whatever it might be?
I really hope so, because, I think I can't speak for Charles, the conductor who was at the rehearsal, but the technology seemed very intuitive for the conductor as well. And as it develops, I should hope that it wouldn't be anything too different for them to pick up a baton with a sensor on, and than any other way. And that way they could just integrate more talent and more visually impaired musicians.
I just wonder how difficult it is, though. You mentioned it's different if you're a soloist, but if you are visually impaired and you are part of an orchestra, how difficult that experience is.
I mean, so my big thing is, for example, there might be a time where you have 3 big chords at the very end of a piece, and everyone needs to come in on that exactly when the conductor tells you. And that's very, very difficult to gauge. So you could be at risk of coming in a little bit too late or hitting that chord way before everybody else. So that ability to be in sync with the other musicians, as well as using your hearing, is really important.
Have people managed so far?
I think the rehearsal, went really well. I think there was a lot of very positive feedback with everyone, and the performance went well.
I suppose a lot of visually impaired musicians have lost work because of their disability.
Yeah, I think so. And an orchestral playing already comes with its own difficulties, because you have to memorize music, and then the difficulty that you can't follow the conductor is an added problem that hopefully this technology will begin to solve.
Vahakn, when is it available?
It's a great question. Hopefully this year. Really, we're going to try to work with the world's leading orchestras and offer them the chance. Ask them, how many visually impaired players do you have in your orchestra? If it's none, can we help you invite them? Would you like to sort of step into this century and really open up classical music in a way that is truly for everyone? Because that's really our goal. And if you watch our BBC Stories documentary, there's a short film out, and you'll see that terrific music gets made, and it's got a real sensibility and the highest of quality. So inclusivity is everything. And so if we can push it for this year, that's really the goal.
Yeah, Vahakn Matossian, they're one of the incredible people who've designed this baton that will enable visually impaired musicians to take part in orchestras as well. And thanks also to Kevin Satizabal, who's a pianist who lives in Northampton. We'll open up the phone lines now for our virtual jukebox. Phone in if you'd like to join us. The number is 08085 909 693. The broadcaster and music critic Mark Webster's with us this morning. Hello, Mark.
Good morning, Don. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks very much. I'm thinking of Mozart this morning because it's his birthday, you know.